Welcome back to Generator, my friends. I am so glad that things are back up and running, and I'm really excited to start bringing you more of these conversations. Today, my guest is a guy that I've been following since early in my photo career, and I got to attend one of his workshops back before the world shut down. He's got a curricula vitae that most photographers would die for, and a list of accomplishments a mile long. He's shot covers and editorials and campaigns for some of the world's most well-known magazines. Besides being one of the most recognized photographers out there today, he's an educator, he's a musician, he's a creator of complex Photoshop actions. All told, he helps other creatives make art. If you haven't already put two and two together, I have the incredible Nino Batista with me this week. Nino has been on my list of guests for far too long, and I'm glad we finally had the chance to sit down and talk. We're going to dive into some real talk. We're going to talk about photography and personal growth and really everything in between. Nino and I cover a lot of ground in this episode. We get into the nitty-gritty of being authentic online and why it's so crucial. Nino opens up about taking a 13-month break from social media and how it changed his perspective on creativity and work-life balance. We talk about the intricacies and perceptions of glamour photography and navigating that space as a guy. We also talk about the ever-evolving world of photography tech and the need for practical tools that actually help us rather than just looking good in an ad on Instagram. Nino's been developing tools and actions for years, and I've been using them for years before we ever met. From overcoming challenges to finding that sweet spot between artistry and technicality, this conversation is packed with tons of hard-earned wisdom. Whether or not you're a photographer, there's something in here for you. Nino is incredibly easy to talk to and is so eloquent that sitting across from him and just listening to what he had to say was a real joy for me. So grab a drink, settle in, join us for an honest, down-to-earth chat I'm calling Tools, Travel, and Truth with photographer Nino Batista. Now on with the show. I'm so glad you're here. I've been trying to, I think, hook up with you for a couple of years now. Sure, the world shut down, but I had come to one of your classes at Sean Black's studio years ago. And ever since then, I'm like, I need to have a longer conversation with that guy. And so I'm really grateful that you're here today. I appreciate it, man.
Well, I agree. And I'm completely of the same mind on that. I'm looking forward to talking to you today. So I appreciate you having me on here.
There's a lot going on. I've been following you, and you've kind of come out of the shadows again. And I say that, let me preface that by saying you never really went anywhere. But there was a period where I kind of looked around social media and I was just like, where'd Nino go? And you've always been someone that's worked behind the scenes, whether it's digital products or photography or teaching or whatnot. Did you take a break from social media for any particular reason, or was it just kind of happenstance that, you kind of step back a little bit?
Yeah. So it wasn't necessarily intentional, and it wasn't really all that long lived, but I did not touch a camera for 13 and a half months.
Yeah.
And what we saw, if you were following me, what you saw was the outcome of that, which is not much to post, going a week and a half without posting anything anywhere. So I wasn't like, I'm getting off social media. Right. What happened was I stopped shooting, and there's a lot of reasons why. But emotionally, to a certain degree, physically, I had some other personal issues going on with family. The industry was changing. It wasn't quite out of COVID yet. We're talking about mid-2022. We were out of COVID, but we weren't. You know what I mean? Like, people were still hesitant. So human engagement was cautiously optimistically growing, right? But I hit this point where I don't want to come across dramatic, because a lot of people will post on Facebook, fuck this, I'm quitting social media, I'm out. And they post that, and then they come back in 2 days. And I'm just like, look, I get the emotion, but relax, okay? So I didn't want to be dramatic, but I knew I needed something else. I didn't know what that was. What ended up being, weirdly enough, where I put my time was into my brand of MVP retouch tools, which is very left-brained, right-brained to a degree, but very left-brained. But I decided I wanted full control of it. And so in summer of 2022, I was working 10, 12 hours a day, making everything in MVP internal, in-house, making a website, making a back-end system, customer system, working on new partners, getting rid of old partners. And I was just kind of like, go long. I'm going to try this. And I took everything in-house in 2022 for better or worse. And I just drowned myself in development. I used to be a web developer, okay? From mid to late 90s to about 2010, I used to be a web designer. Web designer, not so much developer. Sorry, I'm not a coder. I can talk the language and I can listen to my coding partners and I can keep up. But my point is that kept me distracted for several months building that up. And then I started a new development partner. So my point is that I abandoned all creative pursuits, not dramatically. I didn't post them on social media, like I said, but I went into left brain development. I felt almost as if it was like I've always been, I guess, for lack of a better term, I've always been an artist, whether I realized it or not, even as a crazy ass teenager. And I never liked work. I never liked money. I never liked trying to make money. I never liked trying to sell myself. I never liked trying to run business. I don't like anything left-brained. I watch a video about physics. I don't want to calculate physics. I'm very still 14 in my head. If I can play doing the things that I'm passionate about all day long, and then someone goes, "Oh, did you do your taxes?" And I go, "Crap." I'm still a child at heart. So part of me in 2022, and I'm sorry, this seems like a wild tangent, but it makes sense in the minute. The part of me in 2022 said I need to grow up in some ways. And so I got really serious about business. And I don't mean business in the selling sense and the trying to get money out of people and sales. And I don't mean that. I mean, I took things a lot more seriously. I've been very lucky and very blessed in what I've done in this industry, but I decided that I needed to grow up. And so I didn't even know that going in. I just know I stopped. Next thing I know, I'm working on my business and I said, this is what I need to focus on. Then a bunch of other stuff went wrong that year. Hooray. And at the dawn of 2023, I said, this is my time. And I'm staying in Houston. Mm-hmm. I'm staying with my kids. My kids are older. They're 20, 18, and 55. And with the problems and challenges that young adults have. So I had to support them. And I always will. But there were some challenges on that front. Very private, so I'm not going to go into it. But there were some challenges on that front. And I had to take care of it. So my usual social media image of traveling everywhere and going to these cool places and photographing and teaching and everything else, it turned into a dad staying at home on his computer and not touching a camera for a long time. So that's like why I took a break. And that's a long version of why I took a break. And there's a lot of details. But I effectively came back last June. I would argue that the comeback is still happening, but
well, I think, we all kind of fall into that space from time to time. And it's really strange to me that we're both of the age where social media is just kind of a thing that we're sometimes obligated to do, but we remember the world before it, right? And so It always feels a little bit like a job to me, meaning it's not that important. And I don't mind taking breaks or just disappearing because it doesn't rule my world, but I understand the importance of it. So I love the fact that you had to find not only the balance in the right and left hand sides of your brain, but you found balance in personal life, work life, and sometimes stepping back and taking stock of all of that is really important. Now, you've been a photographer for 15 years-ish, thereabouts, 20, if I recall, 2008, 2010, somewhere thereabouts.
It's arguable because I grew up in photography with my dad. So I've been around it.
You're not a photographer, right?
Yeah. So been around it since I was a baby.
Yeah. So where I'm going with this is, as you did kind of reconfigure how you approached everything over the past couple of years, was there one thing that stuck out as you grew up, as you said, that you were like, wow, this is way easier than I thought, and I've been kind of pushing this off? Now that I've grown up, per se, I should have done this years ago. Was there one thing in there? Was it bringing the tools in-house or taking a step back to control your own universe? What was it in there that that really stood out to you in that whole process?
That is an interesting question. It's interesting because I don't exactly know the answer, but
Sure.
if I were to speculate, or if I were to being put on the spot right now to think about it, the first thing that comes to mind is, oddly enough, I've learned to be a lot more private. Not to say that I was screaming about myself constantly on social media. I've never posted my children's name on social media in 15 years, 20 years of social media, for example. I am a pretty private guy, but I ramped up that privateness. I ramped up my struggles, and I didn't talk about it to my friends because they had their own, I ramped up my opinions on things. Something would happen and I'd go to tell a homie or something, and I just kept everything internalized. And the catalyst behind that was partially that everyone else was struggling. Ever since COVID, everyone had a problem. I didn't lose everything like some people did during COVID. They lost their job. They lost everything. So I knew it could be worse, but I tried to understand, because I'd reach out to a friend, people I've known 10, 15, 25 years, and you could tell they were overwhelmed anyway, and they didn't need my opinion that day. They didn't need what was burdening me that day. They were struggling on their own right. Now, it's not to say that I abandoned my friend, but I started being a lot quieter about struggles and triumphs, and just keeping it to myself until things really solidify. It's not outwardly noticeable, but internally on me, I found a lot more solace in keeping things to myself until I process them appropriately, if that makes sense. My personality is very impulsive. It's very communicative. As much as I am an introvert, I will communicate with those close to me, and I try to be less reliant on that kind of communication and keep things internalized, which sounds on the surface like going into hermit mode and struggling with depression. And I'm not going to say that part of that wasn't that, because it was, but it was, again, that awakening, that kind of growing up of maturing. Like, I need to handle my shit. That's it. And other people are handling their shit. Now, with that came another realization, which kind of corollary to that, was that I had not much to give others either. I had friendship. I was present if I could, but I could not carry others' burdens without causing myself a further problem in the delicate state that I was in, if that makes sense. So I tried to just tell people, this is my boundary right now. Don't take it offensively. Those who stuck around, well, what does that say about them? And I stuck around for them. So there was an awakening there about internalizing, not in a negative way. I don't mean bottling up. I mean learning to handle and process your own shit.
Yeah. And you've been really upfront with your vulnerability around a lot of that. And it's one of the things that I've really respected over the years, is that you do come out and you do say, hey, I have this struggle or that struggle, not in that give me sympathy, please, everybody pay attention to me sort of way. It's really just been like a conversation with friends, as you've talked about some of the struggles and as well as please respect my privacy during this time, which has been a really wonderful way to see someone navigate their crowd, right? So I dare say that you've got a few followers. And so there's this oftentimes, you speak to your friends one way, you speak to your fans or your followers a different way, and you really don't keep those as separate things. You talk to everybody the same, at least as far as I see, right, in your outward personality. So I think it's been really commendable to see all the vulnerability that you have. I actually read an article that you had in Bold Journey a year or two ago, and you were very open about some of these things as well. And so do you find that by being open with vulnerability or with the struggles or just the ups and downs, that you feel like people get to know you better? Do you care? Do you feel like it's unburdening? Do you find freedom in it? Like, some people are so guarded about themselves because they're afraid of what the online reputation might be. And you've never really struck me as someone that gave a fuck about anything. And so I look at that and I say, all right, what's the feeling that you get when you are being vulnerable?
I'm going to preface this by saying that it's not like it's not like I haven't made mistakes and poor choices in my day. It's not like I haven't, just messed things up before, because I have. But with that said, I can say with confidence that my mistakes have been from a place of ignorance, and a place of desperation, perhaps, but never from a place of malice, never from a place of manipulation, ever. I'm just not that person. I mean, look around. I mean, the internet, especially, when everybody can hide behind anonymity and things like that, the nastiness, the inauthentic experience that everybody has on the internet. And now it's just such a blur and such a din of just chaos. No one knows what to believe. Information is everywhere, and vetted information is rare, and authentic people are even more rare. And I think people want to be. Like you said, I think they're scared of it. And it's not that I'm super brave. It's just that I think that being inauthentic, which means being vulnerable, which means being honest about what's going on within your boundaries. You don't have to give out private information, necessarily. When I haven't been, or when I've been iffy on it, I always regret it. I always suffer it. In fact, it's not just my mental. Something will happen. Someone will misinterpret me. Someone will take it the wrong way. Someone will tell someone else, and it'll come across wrong out of context. At least if I'm authentic, there's nothing to bury behind me. It's similar to the saying of, if you never lie, you never have to remember anything, right? Because if you don't have to remember anything, because you don't have to lie, you don't have to cover anything up. So being inauthentic, to me, is a lie. And I have struggled with it, but I figured I'm just going to talk about it. When I started my photography journey, I started in glamour and fashion. Mm-hmm. I'm not naive to how the world works, but immediately I discovered an endless sea of perverted men who thought I was one of them. So this was a big catalyst for me, because I thought, there's so many men out here just doing this for the completely wrong reasons. They're out to manipulate. They're out to abuse. They're out to, everything. And they're there. And they think I'm one of them. So they tell me. Right. And I've managed to push all those people far away a long time ago. Occasionally one guy's come into play and I'll push him back. But I thought, well, I'm not going to get anywhere with the stigma that I already have by existing if I'm not completely blunt and honest, not just an engagement and interaction with a model, but like my public persona of who I am. At the end of the day, I'm just a dorky dad who likes guitar and nerdy things. I'm not a cool guy. I don't hit on women. A lot of people have said, oh, so you only date models. No, that's just the only women I meet. If I were an accountant, I'd probably date accountants. Right. I don't know what to tell you there, but I'm not hunting down women. I'm not trying to manipulate girls in any way, but men often are. And so that was a big part of me thinking, I got to bring like my most authentic self, not just for business reasons, but I didn't want to be seen as anything I wasn't.
And that's been something else that I've seen you be quite vocal about, is the level of respect that you have for your models, for your subjects, and making sure that everybody in your community really understands, hey, this will not be tolerated. Creepy behavior will not be tolerated. I think you set a very high standard for a lot of guys out there that are looking to photographers to emulate and learn from, and say, how do I get into some of these situations where I'm shooting for magazines, whether it's glamour or beauty or fashion or nudes or whatever it is. And they look to someone like you who has been successful in the field for the rules. And I love the fact that you do come out and you do stress these things, because oftentimes we can take for granted that this is how we should treat our subjects. But there are the nuances that just don't get caught by everybody, that they don't know how to treat the person with respect. Even if it's, not maliciously intended, there are some things that you need to follow. And you've always been very vocal in your community that any disrespect will not be tolerated. Any of this kind of creep behavior will not be tolerated. I think times are changing and the old traditional ways of thoughts are changing. But every now and again, I'll be out and someone will come up to me and they say, it must be great shooting naked ladies all the time. And instantly that's the turnoff. I know the conversation's over, because I know the way that they're thinking. And it really, really bothers me, because it's people like that are making it tougher for good photographers. I feel like I'm swimming upstream all the time. There's a lot of work to be done in this space, but I just wanted to take a moment and thank you for always being, that champion on that vanguard of saying, this is the way that things have to be done, or else, you're just going to be excommunicated from the entire community because we don't tolerate that. So just wanted to say thank you for doing that.
I appreciate that.
I think one of the things in teaching workshops, right, as we kind of talk about interfacing with students a little bit, I read a quote and I'm going to read it here. It says, "I really don't like registering for a class and end up learning nothing because the egotistical photographer running it just talked about himself the whole time and then sent us home." And that was one of the things on your website, right? And I hear that as well from students from various workshops. How have you approached teaching what it is that you know to such a wide body of students? How do you go in with your students and get across what you need to teach without that layer of ego in it?
No, for sure. That's a big part of it. And I would say, first of all, I was brazen in starting workshops in 2012 because I had a few requests for it. And I was brazen because I was not qualified for it, but only because of the technical knowledge that I felt I lacked. But what I knew from the start, everything from teaching music like I did, I used to be a Logic Pro certified trainer once upon a time, hell. And so a long time ago, Logic 7 or 6, one of those. But anyway, yeah, I mean, I don't want to tell the whole history of it, my realization, but one thing about learning is that everybody is different. So for example, if I were to teach someone how to play guitar, what I teach you can take 5 minutes, and then you run along and practice it. If you don't practice it, you won't get anywhere. And then you come back for another 5 minutes. The more time you spend with me, the better you won't get at guitar. You have to put in the work. I give you guideposts. I give you the rudiments, and then you have to put in the work. So and I used to teach guitar. Let me tell you, most of my students were teenagers, talking about the late 90s. They all wanted to learn a song they wanted to learn, and if they didn't practice unless they were sitting in front of me, it was really obvious, right? So I'm not dumping it back on the student. I'm the teacher. I'm putting myself in that role, so I've got to own up to it. And the way I try to own up to it is understand that I am not here to tell you what to do. I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'm here to tell you how to think, how to approach it. Everyone has a different thing. And on top of that, it's art, just like music. It's subjective. How do you teach something subjective? How do you teach something that can vary wildly? For example, at the dawn of 2020, I realized a lot of people were struggling and having a lot of difficult time. So I offered pay whatever you can, and I'll give you 45 minutes of my time for mentoring. I did 93 sessions in 100 days doing that. And some people in Eastern Europe gave me 12 euros, and I took it and we did a thing. And I met so many different people going through a difficult period, some not, but most were. How do you tell a man in Eastern Europe whose portrait art form is self-portrait photography of the macabre and morbid and his drug addiction battle of his whole life? And these are not easy images to look at. They're self-portraits. There's art in his mind, and it was art, right? I can't tell him it's not art. I can't tell him that the retouching was overcooked. I can't tell him there's too much color. I can't tell him maybe not so many syringes. This is his art. And so how do I respect that? Yeah, if you come to my workshop, you probably aren't doing that kind of work and expecting me to help you with it. But I still try to help that gentleman understand that as an artist, everybody varies wildly. And that variation, it doesn't excuse me from doing anything because I still teach, don't get me wrong, but I put it back on them. It's like, I call it a co-study in some ways. Like, welcome to the class. There's not 40 or 50 of you. I mean, conferences notwithstanding. There's not 40 or 50 of you. There's 10, 12, 8. Now, I try to engage with everybody. What do you do? Why do you do what you do? Tell me about what you normally do. Show me some of your work. And we work with everybody. I want everybody to understand that they're an individual, that they're not here to have a methodology imprinted in their head and then go home and replicate that. I also mentioned, you're not here to create art. You're here to learn methodologies. You're here to ask questions and to think about stuff. What you do next week, next month, or 2 years from now because of this class, that's what satisfies me as a teacher. So we talk about the idiot men, the gross men out there. If I get an inquiry on my workshops, even today, that says, "Hey, Nino, I'm curious about your workshop. How many models and who are they?" I delete the message. If that's your priority, then go hire a model.
Right.
And I know who you are. I've seen you. I mean, come on, I've done this 15 years. Come on. I've seen you. I know who you are. I'm not going to get mad. Swipe delete. I want people who want to come learn. I want people who come teach, in fact. I love learning things from students. I love seeing people's work and go, "Welcome to the class." And I look at their work on the phone and I go, "Why are you here?" because this is amazing, and we have a good time. So I try to individualize and put a responsibility on learning on all of them, and if they come in saying, well, I don't really shoot models, that's fine. That's fine. We can still have a conversation because I want to know where you're at. I want to know why you shoot. It's portraiture. I probably can't help you with landscapes. Okay. But portraits and that human element, I can try to connect. So that's what I try to do. I don't remove the responsibility as the self-proclaimed mentor, but I try to put it back on them. Talk to me. Let's go over this. How can this evolve? And a lot of times they'll say what they need just in the interaction back and forth. And they go, well, maybe, I didn't think about that. Maybe. That's what I hope to do. Not shut up, sit down, and listen to me. No, I didn't like that when people did that to me.
Yeah, and I think that's the big part of education that gets missing a lot, right? Is that the educator doesn't focus on the why. Instead, it's just very easy to phone it in and focus on the what. Set your light up at this, put a subject here. These are your settings, go for it. Here's my settings, just copy them. And nothing really, there's no knowledge exchange. And so the best educators that I've ever seen are the ones that challenge you on the why. Why are you making that choice? Why do you want to shoot this way? Why do you want to go about creating art the way that you create art? One, because it gives you a better indication as to how you can guide that student, but it also makes them think a little bit more critically about why they're there in the first place. Mm-hmm. So do you happen to see any shifts going on over the past 3 or 4 years in the education space, in photography? A lot has been pushed online. There's a lot of gurus that have immediately popped up overnight. Everybody's starting a workshop or a course or, an online adventure or whatnot. Do you see any positive trends, negative trends in the education space now as it starts to expand more and more and more?
Well, the first thing I will say is that I'm rarely a proponent of the idea that anything is oversaturated. I think that everything has a certain time where things grow, they swell and they shrink, and they swell and they shrink. Everything from who's buying and who's not, how many people are in it, how many people are not. There is a cycle. Okay, so we're not going to have it like people love to exaggerate. They get hyperbolic on me and say, everybody's going to be an educator by next summer. No, right. They're not. Just relax. Just calm down. So I'm not seeing that we have an oversaturation, but I'm going to pull my answer from my experience from my kids. Bear with me. My kids are 20, 18, and 15. That makes them squarely in Gen Z. And in hanging out with them, and we've always had a good rapport. We're arguably friends, and I talk to them openly, and there's nothing's off the table in my house. You want to come talk to me about sex, drugs, and rock and roll? Well, let's talk about it. So they have a very honest and open discourse with Dad. At least I've tried. I haven't always done the right thing, but I tried. Anyway, what have I got by putting my thumb on the pulse of Gen Z through them and their friends? Gen Z does not give two shits about social media, by and large. You may not think so, but they do. Young millennials, mid-20s, late 20s do. Teens, just turning 20, not so much. What do they care about? IRL, in real life experiences. That's more exciting to them. Yes, they communicate with each other constantly on Discord and on Twitch and on the text message. And they're constantly on that. No question about it. That's life. But they prize and they put a priority on in real life. They see social media. They see Dad, Gen X on Instagram as, you don't take that shit seriously, do you, Dad? And so what am I seeing is that as we move forward, here I am, next year I turn 50. Mm-hmm. And I realized that I was being the guy who was set in his ways and who loved to invoke back in my day at every opportunity. And where was that getting me as an artist, as a businessman, as a human being? It got me nowhere. Now, when my kids are little, it's easy to dismiss them. 6-year-old wants something, pat him on the head, and then whatever. But then you have these adults who, these 20, 18-year-old, and my 15-year-old, who giving me like a new lease on life. Like I'm discovering new music, not just through them, but because I'm willing to. And I'm discovering that the new photographers that are coming in the scene are not fucking it up. They're not any more than I am. And the old stalwarts, the 30-year veterans, they're not either. This is a cycle, a life cycle that always happens. So where am I going with all this? What I'm saying is that in-person interaction, vetted interaction, 3 or 4 good friends versus 400 social media friends. Sound familiar? Sounds like pre-internet. That is what Gen Z, by and large, seems to care about. And like it or not, in 10 years, Gen Z will start wrenching control of society. And in 20 years, they will have it. Where will I be then? So I'm like, I want to keep making art until I go old and die. I don't want to be forgotten as that guy is still stuck in 2007. And he's complaining about everybody. He has all the answers. No. So where are we going with education? Education to me is that authentic, real world experiences are prioritized now more than ever. We had this idea that everything can be done online. We can chat video, right? Who needs online? We're good to go. Well, I don't think the WALL-E movie is going to come to pass anytime soon. I think people are desperate for that human engagement. I think they want to hang out together. And I think, I'm not just saying that Gen Z is the reason why. I think we older folks are also seeing it as well. But Gen Z, after all, is the future. And if you don't see that, they're going to leave us behind. Gen Z has a general attitude of social media isn't real. Why do you guys realize that, right? And second, they have another idea of why you guys are so obsessed on biases and differences. Gives a shit about white, black, gay, straight anymore. You guys have an obsession. We're going to go over here now. That's what Gen Z tells me. And I love that, to be honest.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to watch that because I'm noticing that here. I don't shoot a lot of Gen Z clients, more millennials, but also the Gen X clients that I have, their kids, right? So I'm interfacing with them quite a bit. And I've noticed the exact same thing, is that there's more of an emphasis on human connection than there is on self-promotion. And that to me is a huge difference from anything that I've seen in probably 10 or 20 years, because there's always been a focus on, I want to stand out. I want to be such an individual. And you've got to listen to me promote about all my greatest features. And now it seems to be like that is such a burden on younger generations where they're just kind of like, yeah, you're right. We don't give a shit about any of that. We'd rather hang out with our friends, talk on Discord, use technology to connect rather than have it be a vanity vehicle. I love that you're hearing that and you're seeing that. I know that for me, I've just noticed there will always be ebbs and flows in however many people are in a certain thing, right? There will always be educators that come and go. My belief over the past 30 years, 40 years has been the good ones will always rise to the top. The bad ones will just kind of float away. There has to be a lot of stamina in there if you decide to get into that space. I don't believe that there's that doom and gloom like you were talking about, like, oh, it's going to be oversaturated or there's going to be too many people. It can feel that way sometimes, for sure. I definitely look around. I'm like, there's no way you have enough experience. And that's not me judging you. I'm like, you picked up a camera last year. Like, I don't know if you should be teaching workshops just yet. That being said, that's old judgmental me, right? So I guess what I'm saying is it's encouraging to see that approach towards social media. I'm going to see where it goes. I'm reserving judgment, and I will just stand back here and shake my fist at clouds like an old man. I've heard you say in the past that you're an artist through and through, and I know you play music, and I know you're a photographer, and I know you have a million things in your world. Do you ever find an imbalance between the artist and the technician? In my neurodivergency, I think of myself primarily as a technician that can make some art sometimes. That I am not driven by what I see some people that are true artists that have to create or their world crashes. For me, I don't view my art like that. There are times where I'm itchy and I have an idea and I want to get it out. But most of the time, I think of myself as a technician that is capable with a camera and understands the business of photography. Where do you land on if you had to think of yourself in 2 seconds, do you find yourself leaning more towards the artist or the technician?
I'm definitely leaning towards the artist, but that assertion and realization did not come smoothly. I hid in the left brain technical work as a graphic designer, as a musician, even as a writer when I had journalism jobs. I hid behind the technical because I enjoy that. because I never saw myself as an artist. I was a graphic designer making advertisements. I didn't see that as an artist. I was a musician playing, rock and roll for whatever it was worth, and some other genres as well. And there was some good moments there, but I was never the lead part of the band. I was never the main songwriter. I always downplayed my own work. I was scared to admit I was an artist. Then I got into photography, and I got into it because I was chasing some kind of new avenue. Because in 2008 and 9, economy tanked, and I needed something. So I borrowed equipment from my dad, and I did not start chasing my passions. I started figuring something new out. And so, that's not the most romantic story perhaps, but it's the truth. And it took years, because what happened? I started shooting mostly glamour. No one sees that as art, at least not on the surface. And I didn't either. So after years and years and years and years, I started realizing that I think like an artist. I need to create. And when I don't, I'm unhappy. And if I go really long periods, I'm very unhappy. But I hide behind the tech. I can talk tech like in Photoshop all day long and and this and that. But you know what has happened in the last, arguable 2 to 4 years, maybe, but acutely this year, I am sick of talking about technology.
Yeah.
If you said, Nino, what's your favorite lens? I'd be like, I gotta go get a drink. I bring up conversations like that, like in my Facebook group, because people want to talk about it. And I intentionally say, what's your desert island camera, right? Things like that. It brings up conversation because I want to engage with people. But if you say, did you look at the latest DxO results of the new lens? I don't give a fuck. Right. I want to make art. My lenses, I don't know where they are half the time. I leave them on the other side of the studio. I just recently rebought lens caps because I lose them all. I'm sick to the teeth of having those conversations. I just want to create. Right. And so I'm starting to embrace and accept that I am an artist. And if you don't, not you, but if someone doesn't want to accept that I am, or you shoot pictures of the pretty girls, and art's just an old guy shooting pictures of the pretty girls, so be it. But I know what's inside me. I have a guitar sitting right over here and an amp on the table you can't see, because I play guitar intentionally every day because I need to have that release and that outlet, because I have to create. So yeah, like you put it, you feel like a sense of creating. I knew I had to create, but I stifled it because it wasn't practical. Think about this. Go back to the 80s. You shoot your eye out, basically the same problem. Why you want to be a musician? Yeah. Once you get a real job. Then I was a graphic designer, self-employed. Why didn't you go to college? Why didn't you get a real job? And then I was an active musician, real job. Then I went to photography and I go, you shoot pretty girls? Why don't you get a real job? Oh my fucking God. Just leave me alone. I'm doing what I do, and I'm an artist. This is how, if I went to get a real job, I would be dead.
It's amazing to hear that story and hear the parallels in my own, meaning I think we grew up at the same time where creative outlets or creative careers really weren't an option. They weren't fostered as much. It was always, go to college or follow this trade path or something, but you will never make a living as an artist. And I know for me, that was beaten into me for years, right? Get the corporate job, go to college, get the degree, get the corporate job, do your thing. Be miserable the rest of your life. That's just how it is. Life is suffering, right? When I made that switch from corporate to photography right around the same time as you in that 2010 timeframe, it really was, I'm jumping into something totally different. It feels great, but am I allowed to make art? I was seeking permission from people to make the art. And it wasn't until recently, probably the past couple of years, where I did give a lot of that up, because I stopped trying to please people with what I was doing and just making the art. Now, one of the things you were just talking about was the gear, right? Everybody likes to focus on the gear because it's kind of this common ground that we all have, right? Absolutely. Where we can say, well, what camera do you have? And, it's a dick measuring contest, right? And so one of the things that I saw recently on social media, and we don't have to spend too much time on this, but I loved your answer, where someone asked about DSLR versus mirrorless. And you just basically came out and said, yeah, my stuff works. My camera still works. It doesn't matter. No one is going to tell a difference. And I screamed yes, because I believe the same thing. I'll use a little Nikon Coolpix 12 megapixel purple camera, or I'll use, my Fuji stuff, like whatever it is, it doesn't matter. If you're struck by that muse, use the tools that you have. It's all about that expression. So
Right.
I just wanted to say how refreshing that was to hear. Like, yeah, I don't want to talk gear either, man. Like, I just
don't.
want to make good stuff, you know?
And I will say this, though, I will flip it the other way, because as an educator, I have all walks of life standing in front of me, whether on a call like this or in a group. And there are people who are very much into the gear. That's their crutch. That's how they feel good about it. They want to talk gear, and that's where they're at. And I don't ridicule them. I try to extract them out of that slowly. Like, okay, I get it. Great lens, good choice. There's a reason why 85 mil is a standard, blah, blah, blah. And then I said, let's talk about your vision. Or it's like, well, what lens should I use here? I bought this one lens because my room is so small.
Yeah.
I'm like, if you're buying lenses and you're picking focal lengths just to fit the shot, that went way over your head. The whole concept of focal length, energy, framing, composition, what you're trying to present, that means you haven't gotten there yet. You're still think focal length is about fitting the shot. Or, I mean, sometimes it is. I mean, 800 millimeter to shoot a lion, probably a good idea. You know, you don't want to be a 1740 up on that, right? But probably a good idea. There's some practical sense. But I challenge them in my classes. But for example, I challenge their gear questions. I say, they're like, what lens should I use? We're in the studio or whatever. And they say, I guess I can use 7200 long enough here. And I'm like, okay, let's stop talking about space. I was like, I shoot in the deserts a lot. And they go, yeah. I said, I shoot in white sands in Mexico. It's 275 square miles of pure white gypsum. I can use a 1200 millimeter lens if I want to. I can use a 14 millimeter if I want to. Why would I pick one over another? And they're like, depends on how far your subject is. And I can change that to anything I want. Why would I pick a subject? Most people don't know why you would pick a focal length based on what kind of expression you're trying to do. It's abstract. There's not a list and a reference checklist that you can go, this focal length means X. No, it's abstract. But I challenge them with that desert idea, and they go, I didn't think about that. So you have a whole case of lenses. What would you pick? Why would you pick? For me, it comes subconsciously. I know the kind of energy I want to capture, and I grab that, and that's why one rolls down the hill, and I go find your lens later. And to me, that's part of that creation. It's kind of like guitars, right? So when I talk guitar, mostly to teenagers, their parents would buy them a guitar. And I would explain to them, I was like, they don't need a $2,000 guitar right now. But if you get them a $35 guitar, they're going to think they suck because it's so bad that it won't hold its tune. The fretting is really difficult, and they're going to think they're wrong. So you got to go a little above that. So there's a bottom threshold. You know, you can't get complete trash. But in photography, not so much. Because you can work with a phone or that old cool pics you were talking about. Yeah. Your vision is everything. Your vision is everything. You know. So like recently, a buddy of mine, he came over with some gear on one of my shoots. He always assists me on shoots. And I was like, why do you have that many 7200s? And he goes, oh, well, this one's a version 1. I just haven't bothered to sell it. And I was like, sold. I'll take a 7200. I haven't had one in a few years because I buy and sell lenses on an emotional way. I'm bored with you. Sell it. I'm using you too much. Sell it. You know. But I bought it from him just because the price was right. It was like, dumb, it was a crazy price. And he keeps the stuff immaculate. And now I have moved into that lens fully. Did I intend to? No. It just organically, I was like, ooh, you know, it wasn't, hey, Matt, did you see my new lens? The old lens is just as good as the new one. We should have a long analysis. Fuck it. No, it just connected with me at the moment. I tried to convey that to my students, and the desert analogy helps them. That's not really an analogy. It's just a comparison, direct comparison. Like, why would I pick a certain focal length when I have all the room in the world? And it hopefully gets them thinking outside of their limitations.
I love that approach, right? And I feel very much the same way that I've sometimes gotten caught in that lens world of just like, oh, I should probably use this lens or should probably use that because of distance or whatnot. But I've fallen in love. I have a 9 millimeter wide lens and I shoot on a crop sensor. So let's say 13 millimeters. And I just love the look. And I've been trying to force myself to practice with it to understand the lens more, not because of distance, but because I want a particular look and can I achieve it? So I just leave that thing on the camera and I shoot the hell out of it because I want to know, do I love this or am I in love with the idea of loving it and just being weird and hipster, right? So I love the fact that, again, you're emphasizing the why. It's, I guess this is a pretty good segue to start talking about a couple of things that I know you have on the radar, all your tools, right? So Nino Batista is known as a photographer, but on the other side, Nino Batista is also known as a non-coding developer of tools. And I use your frequency separation. I use your face focus. I use a lot of your compression and your noise tools, but there's CMX and frequency separation is at version 3, I believe, FS3. So talk to me about the tool thing. Why did you want to, one, develop the tools, and two, how has that influenced what you were doing both photographically and educationally? Like, do you find that exploring in that technical world and making the process of creation easier, or do you find that you're just you're trying to give people a shortcut to making the art that they want to create themselves? What's your kind of philosophy towards creating tools? Like, why even enter that market?
There's a quick history there. I don't know when, but let's say 2014, 2015, I got some inquiries saying, hey, do you offer actions or presets? The buzzword, right? And at that time, in my mind, about 10 years ago, my opinion was that photographers sold presets to make a quick buck, to fleece people. And it was 250 different slight varying color grades that were not that useful. Or they had these companies selling 2,500 presets for $19.99, and all of that just felt bogus, insincere, and useless. And it was, for the most part. And so I refused to sell actions because I thought it'd be gimmicky. I said, no, I'm not going to sit around and make actions, But over time, my methods got, I had it was like 2016 or so, roughly. I realized that my actions palette scrolled forever with a bunch of what I call zombie actions. They were like Frankenstein halfway working things that I made for that one moment. And then I keep using it, talking about like if anyone else used it, they wouldn't understand what the hell it was, but I made it for a specific thing. Some of them were very good on speeding things up. And during my private mentoring sessions like this, I would show people that, and I would just send them 2 or 3 of them, like, here, let me just send you this because it'll set this up a little quicker and this and that. Right. And then I had some friends saying, hey, is it possible, do you have any actions or anything that I can add like skin texture, like a noise just to skin? I was like, no, but I can make one, send it over. And he's like, well, that's killer, thanks. And I realized there might be something here. There might be actual tools that can be useful. I don't think people are using this stuff the right way. I did go out. I have one sibling, and he has multiple degrees in computer science, electrical engineering. He's a computer programmer, a database systems analyst. He's that guy. And I grew up with him. So the basic idea of scripting and coding and making digital functions that can increase efficiency, and I worked on websites with him for years. I get those concepts. And I realized actions are underutilized, really underutilized. And then a couple of plugins that people threw my way, I was like, that one's okay. But that UI was made by an engineer, not a designer. The UX experience on that is horrible. I started realizing there might be something to this. Yeah. And so I developed actions at first, which of course, Photoshop actions they're cool, but they have their limitations, of course. And after I made those, I was selling them individually, like literally like a guy in the street corner. Hey, I'm selling actions. Send me some money. I'll send you an email. Done. It wasn't anything commercial at that point. Then I had a developer hit me up, say, hey, do you want to? We can create panels, plugins. Do you want to work together? And I said, well, let's have a conversation. It was one of those all those emails that you get that just scream scam for some reason.
Yeah, totally.
I was just like, let's give him a go. Why not? And so it ended up happening. And he had a couple of panels that were in mid-gallop, and he sent them over. And I said, I can see the premise here, but this is horrible. The UI is terrible. And I know what a photographer actually wants compared to this. Next thing you know, that started that conversation. And then we finally launched the first Preset Control 1.0 in 2017. And I was just like, whatever, it's a side thing. They developed it. I gave them I was like the consultant, if you will, of how it should work and what it should do and da-da-da. And then it went in that direction. And there's a lot of story beyond that, and some ups and downs, and some changing of personnel, and some dissolving of contracts, and some other nonsense that went down. But we won't go there right now unless you want to. Sure. But because if I start naming names, it'll go bad. But yeah, well, real bad. So what happened was that I said, there's got to be more to these tools than people are making. And just as the AI revolution was happening, I thought, yeah, AI is cool. Don't get me wrong. But there's got to be some functional tools that are still available. And so when I got my new developer, I've been working on this action that edits skin. And I've been remaking it and remaking it and remaking it for months. It is a 227-step action, to give you an idea.
Wow.
Very hard to keep organized of what the hell is happening in order. It takes 35, 45 seconds to run. And then you can tweak things. But the problem is that tweaking everything requires some knowledge of Photoshop pretty well. And if you want to be efficient,
Sure.
all the layers and all the settings and the changes and the key commands and all that. And I showed it to a developer, and he's like, can I have this action and see if I can make it into something? And I said, sure. So I sent him the action. He's like, holy crap, I've never seen an action this complicated. And I said, well, you haven't seen the shit I've seen, because there's some people like that. Serious things. And right about the same time, I stumbled into some YouTube videos a couple, 3 years ago about color science. And that really, especially when I hit my 2022 sort of stopping point, I went heavy into color science.
Yeah.
The basic concept I knew, just like physics, but now I was learning the why, and how color science works, and the very basic concept of color science and how Adobe interprets it. And I was like, ooh, hold up a second. So I started modifying and making new things and testing. I have more zombie actions that I would test. I have a whole folder called MVP testing. It's a mess. You should see it. And I started learning more and more and more. And I was like, there's got to be something I can do with this knowledge. That's the short version. I didn't believe in it at first. I started realizing there's something to it. And then when you find the right partner, like I have now, who is passionate about it, excited about it, and is a lovingly amazing neurodivergent genius. I love him to death. What he does to bring my ideas to life is insane as a programmer. And we have a very good relationship on that regard. And I feel genuinely, this is where I was going. I really do feel like my tools are genuinely useful.
Right.
They're not fluff. They're not more of the same. AI is great and it will evolve, but I'm not trying to sell you another AI thing that changes eyebrows out. That's fine. They do your thing. I'm trying to make real tools. A Gibson Les Paul guitar is basically unchanged since 1959, basically, argued, right? Unchanged. For a reason, it works. It's not just nostalgia. For what it does and for the sound you want, it's not the guitar for everyone. But if you said, here is and they've done experiments like this multiple times. They've even released some. Here's one where the strings are actually invisible lasers, and you can put your fingers on it, and they touch the frets, and it goes right into MIDI, and you can do all this. That's a cool instrument, but it's not a Gibson Les Paul, and there's still something to be said for a Gibson Les Paul. And so I want to make tools that have the fundamentals in check, that can still get things done. We'll ramp forward, we'll move forward as the tech expresses itself and shows itself, but I'm not going for gimmick. I'm going for things that are actually useful. Is what I'm passionate about now with MVP, and I think it works.
I was cruising through some of your old tutorial videos, and that's one of the things that really I think does separate you out in this tool space, in this action space, is that you put so much emphasis on teaching people the nuance of using the actual tool. It's not just, hey, I've got a skin tool, or hey, I've got a color palette tool where you can apply color grading and go forth and conquer. You really get into the nuance of why and how, and especially in, something like CMX2, right? Where you're showing how you can blend the palette, drop certain colors out, and really apply a color palette to enhance whatever artistic feel you want that image to have. And I love that you go through variation after variation after variation so that you're giving the full context. Before someone even buys the plugin from you or buys the action from you, you are 100% on the table about what it does and what it doesn't do, and where you might use it, and what the case studies are, and how you apply it in your own workflow. And I love that, because that, as a consumer, tells me, one, it's very well thought through and designed with my needs in mind. Two, it's not someone that is fly by night. They've put a lot of time and energy into producing this panel correctly for working photographers. And three, believe in the product and you use it yourself. Right? Anybody can throw presets together and save them and then have a pack and be like, hey, here's my pack of presets. But there is a lot that I really am fascinated by in this space of the mix of design, usability, functionality, right? All of those pieces are what I will unabashedly spend money on. but I'll do all my research first to make sure that what I'm getting is a quality tool. So I love the fact that you do put so much emphasis in there. Is there one of these tools that is your favorite child? Is there one in there where you're like, I am so glad I made this, not even so much for the entire world, but for me, this changed how I approach things?
I would have to say it has to be the SKN panel because there's a couple of reasons. First of all, you can edit skin lots of different ways. And I edit skin manually. I edit skin with that panel. I edit skin, some variation and depending on what I'm doing. But that one is near and dear to me for very selfish reasons in that, developing of panels is a complicated thing, scripting, coding, and all that. And that one, all the functions that it outputs, I made. And that's near and dear to me because I made that. My developer was like, you sure about this? And I said, yeah. And then we went through several versions and iterations of that. And I said, actually, scrap those layers. Here's a new one. I sent them a new script, a new action. It's near and dear to me because it does work. And all the output layers were my ideas and my execution. So I feel like I put my heart and soul in it. If you're making it work, that's because I made something that you can use. That what could be more proud than that? CMX2, it pulls palette extraction. I know the concept, wrote this idea how that machine learning works to extract palettes. I had nothing to do with that, but I know how to apply it and use it. So I love them all, but SKN definitely is my baby because, lack of a better term, I made it. You know what I mean? And seeing it go from clunky action, because at the end of the day, no matter how good your action is, it's going to be clunky because there's a lot of extra fluff in it that's not necessary because it's just a set series of instructions. When you convert all that to a script, my partner is a badass. When you convert all that to scripts and it becomes efficient and quick, oh, wow. It's like watching a kid be born, if you will.
It's great. And I feel that come across, right? Especially when I'm watching some of the videos as you're explaining these things. I feel it come across. And I was just always curious. And that SKN panel is dope. If you haven't used it, get out there and try it. It is phenomenal on skin. Let's move forward a little bit. I know one thing that I've been seeing you talk a lot about lately is kind of an upcoming European tour. But before we get to that, I know I had Dennis Dunbar here on Generator, about 12 episodes ago, thereabouts. And he and I sat down for a while, and I saw that you guys are getting together out in LA teaching a class together, right? This is like the power duo, as I mentioned the other day. I would love to be a fly on the wall in that room. What are you guys talking about? And tell me a little bit about the class.
It's the first time I've done this specific class, and it's a focus on commercial retouching. Which when you say commercial, people immediately think technical and difficult, right? And to a certain degree, it's a little more technical because, you just have to be, right? But he was curious about how we could partner. And it was his thinking on this. And he said, how can we partner on such a thing where I come at it, him comes at it from a retoucher who gets a job from a client and a retoucher who does his own work. Because I'm not someone, this is how he saw me, he's correct. I'm not someone who sees retouching as an unknowing afterthought, a necessary evil. It's part of what I do. I love it. It's integral to the work that I do, right? So he's like, you coming at it from, like, back a better term, fine art. I'm coming at it from a client. How can we compare and contrast that and teach people about the commercial space? So one aspect of commercial retouchers, especially Dennis and people like him, with some understanding of color science in general, which is I'm really oversimplifying, but some understanding of color science in general. When you get to the point where you're like a dentist or you work at gloss post-production or another one of these big production houses, it does not matter what the image is. You're not a boudoir editor. You're not a car editor. You're not a product editor. You are an editor. You understand pixels. You understand how the math works. You understand calculations. You understand how to manipulate pixels, frequencies, all of that. Nothing is out of your realm. Earth Oliver is another example of that. Seth McCullough is another example of that. Not everybody wants to do that. Most people are boudoir, wedding, high school seniors, fashion, GWC wants to shoot girls. You have a focus. And that's what you want to learn how to edit. In the commercial space, you want to learn how to pixel push, pixel alchemy, as Renee Robin would say. You can have your niche as a fine artist, but I'm also a hyper nerd about the color theory and the color science. And so pixels are pixels. I'm not scared of them. And so he thought, I think we can help people out there. But more importantly, on his end, we're going to talk about the business aspect of it, because a lot of people say, how do I edit posters for Marvel? Well, there's methodologies there. And so there's going to be a lot of business discussion, don't get me wrong, but we're going to try to push the idea of learning retouching at its most fundamental core level, where you're not editing people or cars, or you know how to manipulate information, data, chroma, raster, and luma information to get whatever the hell you need done. That's kind of the thesis on it.
And I love that, because commercial retouching, commercial anything really, you put commercial in front of photography, retouching, whatever it might be, people get freaked out, right? Immediately they're like, I don't know how to get into that world. I don't know what to do in that world. It's Narnia, right? I've got to go through some magic portal to get to commercial world land. And it's really not that way. So, but there are, like you said, standards that I think a lot of people are just unaware of when you're entering that space, right? You do level up. It is the NFL of photography to be doing things at a very, very high level. But that doesn't mean that the people that are performing in that space are any more or less of an athlete than you. They just kind of know the training program to get there. So this sounds like a great fundamental place for folks to get a lot of knowledge from two completely disparate views on the commercial retouching space. And you don't see a lot of that. So that's going to be super exciting to be able to bring that out.
It is. And of course, courses like this exist, but I've never been part of one like that. Dennis has done them everywhere from California to Serbia. But he doesn't have as many under his belt as I do overall, which is one of the reasons he came to me. He goes, look, I've done these. I've done as many as you. Maybe we can talk. And so we talked and we figured that out. Now, what's interesting about the commercial space in the arts, like you said, NFL, right? Well, if you look at the NFL or the NBA, wherever, there's not one player in the NBA who's just a lousy idiot who does not belong on the court. Even the worst player in the NBA is going to wipe my ass on the court, right? Okay. Totally. So my point is, in the commercial space, everyone is good. You can, I'm going to be mean for a second. I'm just going to be blunt. You go to any local, regional, let's say here in Houston, right? And you look in a model things. I need a photographer for portfolio work. You're going to find great photographers. You're going to find awful ones that have websites and social media. In the commercial space, everyone playing and working in commercial is good. That's a given. Now, there's who understands the client's style, who has the most efficiency in terms of turnaround, who has the best personnel in terms specifically what the client wants, who it's not who's good, it's who they pick, what the client picks for that job, or what what kind of relationship you have with your retouching, with your production company, that they understand me. I don't care if you're all good, you understand me. You're going to put you on retainer for all these campaigns. In the commercial space, no one sucks. That's it to remember.
No, I think it's an important point, which is why, at the end of the rainbow, right, we all want to be recognized for having our own particular voice in the industry, right? We want someone to be scrolling and stop and say, oh, that's Matt's, that's Nino's, that's Dennis's, right? I can tell that just from the style. And that's one of the biggest compliments that you can get, is when someone says, I know your stuff immediately. And I'd imagine in the commercial world, there's less dependence on your capability and more on the voice that you bring and your style and what it is, like you were just mentioning. What are the things that you can contribute above and beyond just the pure raw skill that you have? Right. And a lot of times that comes down to individual personality and soft skills, right? How you interface with the client.
Yeah, there's very few like mega rock stars. Like I liken it to, if I may, I liken it to like session musicians, right? So if you get like a Steve Lukather or someone like that, these guys are chameleons. They can play on anything, and they have played on everything, right? Speaking of Lukather, Jeff Porcaro played on everything, right? There's so many studio musicians that the world doesn't know about unless you're into it, and they're all amazing. There's a small 1% of them that you don't hire to get. Like, I need some funky guitar. Get Steve in here and give me some funky guitar. I need some heavy guitar. Get whoever, give me some, whatever the heck, there's a few who you hire because you want to get them. Robert Fripp comes to mind. So you don't hire Robert Fripp to tell him what to do. You hire Robert Fripp to get the Robert Fripp vibe. If you want Robert Fripp, you hire him for that. And if you don't want Robert Fripp, you don't bother him. And in the retouching production space, there's people who can chameleon into anything and produce anything. Like, oh, who's the best at cleaning skin? They all can clean skin. What's the variant? But if you want something So my point is, striving for that 1%, you shouldn't strive for that. Thus is going to happen organically, where you're a production person who's hired 100% for your vision. As a commercial retoucher, you are hired for your service, but also, like you said, the soft skills, and also that little extra something that you might do that vibes with this client, but doesn't vibe with that client. And then, of course, just proximity. People who tell me, I live 45 miles outside of Kansas City and I want to get into commercial retouching. I can do that, right? Because everything's online. Kind of. You really need to go to the major markets. You can't just completely be online. You have to establish yourself and then go live in Sri Lanka and they FTP everything to you. Did I just say FTP? You know what I mean?
You did. You dated yourself, man. But I was right with you. So I'm right there.
So, it's like you got to be in those markets, right? So I'm in Houston, and Houston is cute in that they think they're a fashion place.
Yeah.
No, there's a lot of great art here, a lot of great art, but we are not a fashion mecca. If LA, some client says, crap, I need Matt, yep. Wait, no, man, I'm in Europe this month. Shit, next, who's next? They move on to the next person. Who's around, right? The commercial space is kind of cutthroat. I don't want to go to the commercial space. I arguably dance in there, but I don't want a commercial campaign. I have no interest in that at all. It sounds soul sucking. So people like Dennis who can do that, and other photographers who can do that really well. I mean, I commend that. I'm a pretentious artist. I only do what I want.
Yeah. Pretentious is the first word that came to mind. So, I just, when I started and I dabbled, and I say dabbled because I was not in the NFL. I was like, Pop Warner football at best in the commercial world. And, I realized very early on, this wasn't the space for me. And it wasn't because I was bad at it. It just, it gave me no excitement to be shooting products or to be retouching products or to be not able to deliver my own vision, because I didn't have a voice. I didn't have a brand for my own stuff. I was good at what I did, but it didn't stand out. So I think, just understanding that early on, do you want to play in that space or not, is totally something that if you decide not to, it doesn't make you any less of an artist. It's just you have more time to focus on what it is that you're good at. Now,
my flippant answer to people, if I may, answer to people, and they go, well, you should get into product photography. You should get into weddings. You should get into this. There's a lot of money in it. I say, there's a lot of money in cocaine too.
It depends on which side you're on, I suppose, selling or using.
Right. I mean, if I'm going to run coke, I will make some money. If that's the only goal, there are other ways. In fact, there are better ways. I would be, I think, equally as miserable using the medium that I love, like photography, to do something I don't like. I'd be equally miserable doing that as running coke.
Talk to me about this. I saw dates in Amsterdam. I saw dates all over the place. Talk to me about what is upcoming for you in terms of travel and workshops and all that.
Right. So this trip is very personal for me, because this trip was ramping up at the end of 2019 and it was about to launch in the beginning of 2020.
Yeah.
You know how 2020 went for everyone. So travel was completely out of the question. So everything fell apart and I canceled everything, and like everybody else, took a hard left, right? And so when I've done a few workshops here and there in the last 3 or 4 years, brazenly did one in the middle of 2020 here in Houston, just to kind of test bed, and everybody had masks on and everything, I did that whole thing of later. There was no later. It was just an excuse. And I told myself that I was going to get to workshops again in 2025. And I basically didn't travel all of 2023. I said, I'll do it later, but then they just clicked. And I was like, no, I'm going to do this. It's time. And when I started reaching out to my contacts, they're like, hell yeah, we've been waiting. And so, with that said, it is not by any stretch of imagination just a European holiday. I'm running workshops. I'm trying to do work while I'm out there. And so the amount of upfront work to book these things, market them, sell them out, fill them up, create curriculum for them, the scheduling of the travel in general, acquiring the talent for it. It's incredible the amount of work that we've done. And you mentioned Amsterdam is close. This place called Amersfoort, which is outside of Amsterdam in Netherlands. That will be the very first European workshop I have ever done. I'm very excited about that. But then we also have London as well, right outside London. We're discussing now. We're discussing Edinburgh. And then also discussing Rome, also discussing some really Hail Mary like Tokyo and Sydney. But these are conversations that are not coming in cold. These are conversations that have happened before. And going back to what we talked about Gen Z, it also hit me this year that those in-person interactions are going to be important. Sitting here, in my little office with the curtains drawn and plugging away at social media does not a career make, not the way I want it to be.
Yeah.
And so I got to get out there. You know what I mean? A lot of people think, oh, you want to sell all these workshops and make a ton of money. That's your motivation. Not really. No, I don't want to go into red, but I want to get out there and I fancy myself, if you will, as someone who is a self-proclaimed educator mentor. And I do enjoy that aspect of what I do. So if I can give something to the people, and I'll explain that in a minute, give something to the people where I'm going that they've been asking for. Or maybe they haven't. Maybe they see a promo for the first time and go, who the hell is this guy? It looks pretty good. Let's go. If I can give them that, but then I can get out there and I can see the places I've been wanting to see forever, and I can do work out there. God knows what kind of inspiration I'll get, photographing in Scotland. What kind of inspiration can I get just walking around Amsterdam? These are things that a lot of people know. I've done my share of traveling. I'm grateful. I've been to 46 of 50 states, Mexico and Canada. And of course, I'm from the Caribbean. So I have been around, but not across the pond, as they say. It's finally time for that. And I'm looking forward to the inspiration. I'm looking forward to meeting a bunch of friends that I've known online only. Really excited about that. Now, when I say give back, here is one way that I'm trying to make it happen. I'm trying to read what every location wants. If I say I'm going to go to Edinburgh, let's shoot in castles. Why? Because that's what every tourist wants to do? Okay, I'm going to go to Mexico. Well, we need to go to Cancun and shoot on the beach. Why? Everything doesn't have to be American-centric about what we see other countries as. What do they want? Turns out Mexico wants studio training. So I'm in Mexico City, in a big, humongous, dirty city, like any other big, humongous, dirty city. I'm nowhere near the coast. We're not shooting bikini models. We're talking about studio commercial lighting. And that organization was like, hell yeah, an American photographer wants to come down and do that? You don't want to just go to our beaches and get drunk? No. And so I am trying to bring and work with the locations. What do people want there? What do people look for there? And not just force the American stereotype onto them. I'm not going to go to Tokyo and shoot a bunch of kimonos. I'm trying to see what the markets want and what I can bring for them, not just push on, American viewpoints onto it. In the limited travel that I have internationally and even around the States, that American viewpoint does dominate. And, I have been the feature photographer in these ridiculous shoots. Sorry if you're listening and I went to one of your shoots. They were ridiculous. And I was the featured photographer for a lot of them, Jamaica and Aruba and Mexico and blah, 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 South Florida. And why do they go there? Why do Americans go there? For good reasons. Because it's beautiful and you can vacation. But I'm not going to go there and go, because the locals go, but you say, I'm going to go to tiny little island of Aruba and give a studio class. The locals are like, well, damn, I think I can gain something from that. So I'm trying to go slightly in that angle with the limited knowledge that I have. I don't exactly know, but I try to find that information out. So that's kind of one of the initiatives of this tour as it evolves, is try to see what that region wants and if I can bring it.
Well, I got to believe, too, that pushes you personally and professionally to, as you're focus grouping, for lack of better words, focus grouping what these locations want. It's got to feel good to be able to dig into your bag and be like, oh, wow, I haven't taught whatever studio lighting in a while. I haven't done this in a while. That'll be great. Not only do I have to understand what they want, how I'm going to teach it, but there will be the intrinsic cultural difference between the American mindset and whatever country you may be in and how they would apply these certain things. I love the fact that you're pushing your comfort zone, so to speak, and diving into that unknown a little bit. Even though you are very secure in what you'll be teaching, it's got to be a little bit unnerving to some degree to not necessarily know what's going to happen in any given place. As you start to put all these logistics together to really understand, all right, I'm going to have to go from the Netherlands where I'm teaching this one thing to Edinburgh where I'm teaching something completely different, rather than going and playing the same set list night after night after night.
That's exactly right. And it goes back to, you can align it with why I feel like I wanted to express my authenticity about a guy shooting models. Well, I'm not going to go to Europe like a typical arrogant American and say, do it my way or the highway because I say so. They're going to be like, we have YouTube for that. We have all kinds of resources for that. I want to try to bring that co-study philosophy of, well, here I am. I'm here to learn as much as I am to teach. Let's see what we got, I've been very, very excited about that. I noticed that state to state, and I really have been to 46 of the 50 states, and it does vary region to region. PNW is a little different than Northeast, sure. And of course, I know South Texas very, very well, etc. There's some cities I prefer never to go to again, but I try not to blanket everything in general. So, for example, I've been advised repeatedly by my contacts in Oceania and going up to Asia, and they say, look, Tokyo is an industrial sort of mecca, but you walk in there as an American, first of all, they're going to be like, yo, we don't speak English. Right. We don't do that here. Yeah, in Netherlands they do. Puerto Rico they do. Mexico they do. But in Tokyo, there's like, nah. They're like, so you're going to walk in there and make everybody, you need a translator, and they're going to be like, who's this American? Okay, fair point. But I'm not so naive to think that there's 12, 16 million people in Tokyo are exactly the same. Right. That's naive. Right. So I want to find out for myself. I want to see, engage what they want over there and not treat them like one giant stereotype the way I don't want them to do that. To me, there are 20, I don't forget how many people are in Tokyo, depending on how you actually calculate it, but I know it's over 10 million. So these warnings that I got from my contacts, I hear them, but I'm still curious. I think there's more there. I think there's more possibilities there. And I don't think that all 30 million people in the greater Tokyo area feel the exact same way. That's naive. So I'm curious. I want to learn about the people. I want to learn about what they look forward to and learning about arts, learning about photography, where their priorities are. For example, I found out that in Tokyo, a heavy-handed retouching is considered a commercial standard. Again, there's enough people that there's a lot of variation, but if you look at the commercial standard, portrait retouching at a higher level of porcelain look is actually considered the standard there, I'm discovering. And so that's going to affect maybe some curriculum, or at least I'm going to challenge them, and I'm going to ask them their why and how it affects my why, etc. But I'm not going to come into let me tell you the American way. First of all, we can have a whole conversation on this, but I was born in San Juan, Puerto Rico. I moved to Houston when I was 3 years old. I go back to Puerto Rico, I feel like a tourist, and I've never felt at home here.
Really?
I don't feel at home anywhere. I'm very nomadic in my head. So I don't come across let me tell you the Puerto Rican way to do things because I was born there. It's fucking dumb. And there's no such thing as that. I know how to make some Puerto Rican food though, look out. So I still want everybody to tell me where they're at. I'll try to meet you somewhere in the middle, and let's see what we can both discover. It is not a tour of standing on stage and screaming about who I am. It's a tour of immersing myself in the different individualities of the type of artists that they're out there. I want to see what I can do for them and what I can learn from them.
It's that collaborative spirit that I think, from an adult learning standpoint, works best. In my experience, in terms of the workshops that I've been in for 20 some odd years, in a variety of careers, in a variety of industries, what I find is when there is a connection between the student and the instructor, the educator, the teacher, that is more collaborative, that is just really imparting knowledge rather than saying, this is the definitive way to do something. Not only do I retain more, but I'm more attentive. I'm more open to possibilities. And it blows my mind that a lot of educators don't approach things that way. So the fact that you're diving into this head first, knowing that there is going to be, Stephen Pressfield in The War of Art calls it the big R resistance, where people are going to say, well, this is going to be hard. And instead of you saying, yeah, maybe I shouldn't go there, you're like, bring it on. That to me is just a wonderful part of what you're trying to do and how you try to teach and the philosophies that go along with that. I think it's going to be really interesting to catch you on the backside of it when you do come back and hear how the whole thing goes.
And there'll be ups and there'll be downs and there'll be successes and probably some travails, and that's just the way it works. But I very much look forward to it. Yeah.
That's awesome. Listen, man, I've been sitting here. We've been talking for about 75 minutes, and I didn't even realize. I looked at the clock and I was like, we're just getting started. I've got a book like this that I want to talk to you about. So this is what happens when you get two people with verbal skills together, and we're able to just talk and talk and talk in tangent. And I love it. Thank you so much for being here today. Where can people find you? It's pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. One, my name isn't John Smith, so Google Nino Batista, it's all there because I have a nice, unique name. I did ceremoniously leave Twitter because I'm sick of the cesspool that is X.com. And when I did, someone swooped up Nino Batista handle. So you'll find that guy if you type in my name. But other than that, it'll be me.
And your tools, same place, just kind of go to ninobatista.com and kind of link from there to everything.
Yeah, it's mbpretouchtools.com, but just remember my name. Like I said, I'm blessed that I have a unique name. So if you type in Nino Batista, you pretty much find everything that you might be curious about. Also, going back to the beginning of the conversation, to a degree, I try to make myself accessible. If you're a photographer and you send me a friend request on Facebook, I'm probably going to accept it. And if you send me a DM, I'm probably going to answer it at some point. I try to be as accessible as I can. Everybody has boundaries. I know some weirdos out there, but for the most part, I make myself accessible. So don't be scared to reach out to anybody. If you want to say a message, drop me an email, go for it.
Thank you so much for being here. Hang on a minute while everything kind of uploads. But man, this was such a bucket list check off for me. Thank you for spending so much time with me. I really appreciate it.
Man, it's my honor. It was a great conversation, man. Seriously, thank you so much.
You got it. I'll talk to you soon.